Joining us now is Tom Bevan, editor-in-chief of RCP. How are you, Tom?
Hey, Brian. How are you?
We're doing very well. Listen, I want to start by talking about what's likely to happen tomorrow. I mean, look, we don't know how this Virginia race is going to come out. We've seen the polls, but we don't really know how it's going to come out. But in New Jersey, it seems pretty clear that Chris Christie is going to win in a landslide. And I submit to you that we're going to have in Republican circles that same old conversation that we have every time something like this happens. You know, which is the right approach? Which is the right Republican approach? Is it the Tea Party guys like Cuccinelli, or is it the reach across the aisle, more moderate approach seen in somebody like Chris Christie? How do you think that discussion is going to go there, Tom?
Well, probably the way it normally goes, and we've already seen that because. We've seen a lot of commentary saying that Cuccinelli loss is going to sort of is symbolic of the party's problems and why they can't seem to sort of get their act together because they keep nominating these Tea Party crazies and that sort of thing. I suspect we'll probably see more of that only because the Virginia race is one that I think. I mean, Terry McAuliffe is a really not some sort of towering political figure. To be kind, I mean, he's not a great candidate. He's not inspiring a lot of confidence or anything. So it's a race that Republicans could and probably should win, but they do have a candidate who is struggling, and we'll see how it turns out. But I think Republicans, it's going to be another one of those that they look at and are like, boy, we could have used somebody else in there. Not even necessarily someone who's more. I mean, Virginia's willing to elect conservatives. They do all the time. So it's not necessarily, Sean Trendy's written about this for us on Real Clear Politics. It's not so much Cuccinelli's policy positions as the way that he speaks about them and messages them to the public, which turns off a little bit of the electorate, I think.
Yeah, Tom Bevan's our guest. He's the editor-in-chief of Real Clear Politics. And what you guys have done at RCP so well is created the poll averaging. And you guys know polls better than anybody. And I got to ask him, and right now you've got it at McAuliffe plus 6.7. That's the RCP average, where you average out all the polls. But I'm looking at Washington Post is showing McAuliffe plus 12. I'm showing Emerson College showing McAuliffe plus 2. I'm showing the latest Quinnipiac, I believe, has McAuliffe plus 6. They really, I mean, obviously all of them show McAuliffe winning, but to what do you, how do you explain the disparity? Is it because of the turnout models they're looking at?
Yeah, I mean, we've learned this, and we've learned it. We learned it in 2012 too. I mean, this is why the poll average is such a useful tool, because you do have these sort of wide variances because polling is more of an art than a science, depending on what sort of assumptions the pollsters make. How they ask the questions and in what order they ask the questions, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, there's a lot of variables that go into that will produce the difference between a plus 2 or a plus 12. But I mean, outside of those, if you throw out the low and the high, I mean, you've got 5 polls, plus 6, plus 6, plus 7, plus 7, plus 11. I mean, it's kind of rare that you have that sort of agreement, and I think. One of the reasons that you've got a libertarian candidate. We don't know how much he's going to end up pulling in the end, and where those votes are necessarily going to go, or whether those folks are going to stay home. But you do have a situation where the polls would have to be, all the polling would have to be wrong, and that happens. It happens on occasion. It's rare, but we do. For example, in 2008, when Obama ran against Clinton up in New Hampshire, all those polls were wrong. They showed Obama winning by, I think, 7 or 8 points, and he lost by a couple. So it does happen on occasion. Yeah. But I think it's really unlikely.
Well, but you have this Robert Sarvis guy, and he's pulling a significant number, higher than most libertarian candidates do pull, which suggests, I think many people would say, that there's a dissatisfaction with the state of politics in the Commonwealth right now. A pox on both your house. I'm not going to vote for the Democrat. I'm not going to vote for the Republican. I'm going to vote for somebody else just as a protest. Do you think at the last moment, when it comes time to pull the ballot, what does history tell us about what happens in situations like that?
Well, history tells us that libertarian candidates, third-party candidates, typically poll worse on Election Day than they do in pre-election polling because, to your point, a lot of folks like to tell pollsters that they're going to vote for a third party as sort of, as a protest vote. But when it comes right down to it, they know that's going to be a wasted vote because that person has no chance of winning. And so you will often see, on Election Day, these third party candidates get far less than they were polling. And we saw this last time with Chris Christie. Remember, there was an independent in that race who was, above 10%. And ended up getting, I think, well below that on Election Day, somewhere in the 5% range. And a lot of those votes migrated to Chris Christie. So the question you have to ask is, well, who are these Sarvis voters more likely to migrate to? Or are they perhaps more likely to not even go out to the polls? Because to your point, Brian, they're so disgusted with sort of they're expressing a disgust with both candidates and with the political system. So we don't know the answer. I mean, the only way to we'll know it tonight, but we can't really project where those votes are going to go.
Yeah, but what's your sense of it, though, Tom? Because, I mean, if they do go to the polls and they decide at the last minute, I just can't vote for the guy, it's throwing away my vote, where do you think they'll go?
Hard to say. I mean, they might go. Some of them might go to Cuccinelli, but the problem for Cuccinelli is, he's got to have all of them to make it a race. I mean, he's going to have an overwhelming, disproportionate number of those folks turn out and vote for him, and I just don't know that that's going to happen.
Tom Bevan from Real Clear Politics, you mentioned Sean Trendy's article at RCP, and I do suggest you all read it, realclearpolitics.com. It talks about the significance of the Christie victory, the anticipated victory, of course, today in New Jersey. No one wants to count any chickens here. Yes, everyone is looking at the Virginia race, and they're seeing this as a referendum on whether the Tea Party has the right messaging necessarily to win. But what does it mean to the Republican Party, especially on the national stage, with Chris Christie going to such a huge victory? 4 years ago, the unions, they wanted to destroy Chris Christie because he actually took on the teachers union. What is the real meaning behind this victory?
Well, I mean, that's a good question. Christie is people are looking at him as sort of the new model. One more comment I'd make before we drop off of Virginia is part of the dynamic there too is the amount of money that's being spent. Terry McAuliffe.
Oh yeah, you can't discount that.
No, I mean he has swamped Cuccinelli in terms of the dollars spent there. Chris Christie's sort of in a different situation, and look, people are looking to him. One thing that Christie has done really well. And I was talking to Scott Conroy. He's our national political reporter who's covered this race. Christie is doing really well, far better than sort of other Republicans have done among African Americans, among Hispanics. And so he's sort of but he's a conservative governor. I mean, he's led in a fairly conservative way, especially for a blue state. He has a pretty decent track record, but he's done it in a way that hasn't turned off other pieces of the electorate. And I think that's sort of the takeaway here is not necessarily that, well, you've got to have sort of a moderate, right. You've got to have someone who's going to compromise Republican principles, and that's something that the Republican base, that's sort of anathema to them. But and I think this is one of the things that people are attracted to Christie about is his style. It is he and
pugnacious style, right?
Disagree on a tremendous amount of things, but Christie's style is different. It's unique. And it attracts people to him because of the sort of the blunt-spoken way that he articulates his principles and conservative values.
All right, Tom.
And Republican ideals.
We got to leave it right there. Thank you so much. Greatly appreciate it.
You bet.